Jazz's Story, presented by Merge. Please be aware that within the following story, there are mentions of suicide, suicidal thoughts, depression, and anxiety. Take care of your own body-mind with that in consideration. The thoughts and ideas discussed in this story may not align with those of the Human Development Institute, Merge, or the University of Kentucky.
Vampires have always been my biggest special interest as an autistic person. I also feel out of place and out of time, like vampires are, because they've been around for so long that they're often not super connected to the social culture, but they still have all of the supernatural graces and poise to be able to navigate the social culture. It doesn't matter. I also have lupus. I cannot be in the sun anymore. If I am in the sun, I will break out in rashes. I will have a flare out. So I'm a night person now. And then also they don't really feel like pain a lot of the time. Like they don't have to experience illness. I have chronic pain. It sucks. But I also really like the themes of just kind of like having to hide who you are, or like having that like, am I a monster? And like those types of stuff, because I've dealt with PTSD. I've had, a lot of late diagnosed autistic people have been the subject of abuse. And I really identify with those themes. And there's just a lot of cool vampire stuff coming out right now. Like Interview with the Vampire, they're back. And that's crazy. And I'm very excited for that. Any kind of vampire, I love it. Sometimes I wish I was more like the singular special interest autistic. I find that, man, they really know exactly what they want out of life. Like there's a guy on TikTok I follow whose special interest is Dracula. So we're related, but he's just into Dracula. So, and it's just like, maybe my life would be much simpler if it was just one thing instead of I have like 7 special interests that I have to like constantly hop between. So it's fun. The biggest thing is agency. An agency to take responsibility for myself and my actions. The agency to set boundaries, even when they are uncomfortable and can lead to the termination of like relationships and friendships. But also agency when it comes to mental health professionals and doctors. I am a person that was traumatized by inadequate mental health care. I had received EMDR therapy without actually being properly informed what it was going to entail. It was a social worker who performed it for me and did not really give me the coping skills of what it would be like to quite literally relive your trauma for therapy. I'm not knocking on EMDR or anything, but I did have a poor medical healthcare professional, and I continued to see that medical healthcare professional for longer than I should have because I did not know how to stand up for myself. And going to other therapists, I've had, probably 6 or 7 therapists over 10 years. When it comes to therapy, it only really works if you have a strong relationship between the therapist and the client. If you don't have a good rapport, if there's not trust, if there's not a mutual understanding, the treatment just doesn't really work as well. And I had always felt like it was my fault that a lot of the treatment didn't work. When in all actuality, when I finally found a therapist that I could trust, that I felt like listened to me, and for a lot of autistic people, even though my therapist was not autistic, could understand and believe in at least entertain the idea of what my internal logic is. I've either had problems where they do not understand racial relationships with me being biracial, and they would give me what I feel like is very white advice that doesn't really apply. One of the big pieces of advice I remember a therapist giving me was, sometimes it's better to stay silent and be right than to be loud and be angry. But when someone's doing like a microaggression or a racism towards you that's not satisfying, it just means I hold on to that hurt, right? And that was not necessarily good advice. It was not really informed advice. And I think a lot of people don't know what good therapy looks like. I didn't. It took me a long time. When I see a new therapist, I have questions for them. I've learned agency. The idea that I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. I don't actually have to do those things, and that I can advocate for myself and for others. And I think that that's really important in the mental health space, because even though like we could talk about like I learned coping mechanisms or I learned how to be comfortable with myself, truly I think for anyone on a mental health journey who has a mental health condition that they want to use therapy as a way to like get control of their life, the biggest thing that you can do is to be able to tell your therapist, no, I don't think so. Or I disagree. Or I think that we're getting off topic. Being able to do that That was the biggest lesson that I learned. And I take that and I apply that to every other aspect of my life. And I've been so much happier. A lot of people will hear that and they feel like, well, setting boundaries is kind of mean. But also, you're kind of setting everyone up in your life for failure if you don't tell them what your boundaries are. You're not allowing people to succeed and to treat you how you want to be treated if they don't know how you want to be treated. And sometimes people need gentle reminders because we are humans that make mistakes. Sometimes I'm just going to be weird, and you need to be cool with that. And if you're not cool with that, then maybe we don't need to hang out, especially in the autism space. You know, we always talk about challenging behaviors and like, what is a behavior that should be changed? And like, for me, 9 times out of 10, I don't think a behavior needs to be changed. If a behavior is challenging or if it's negative, then you need to address the cause of said behavior, right? I know for me and a friend who's autistic and has ADHD, one of our favorite activities is parallel play. In a traditional friendship, that would be weird for us to just both be silent over Discord playing different video games. But we're having the time of our lives. We're having so much fun. And it's affirming, and I don't have to talk. And like, maybe we will say a thing, like he'll react to something that's happening in this game, or I'll ask him a question, or something will randomly pop up, but there will be hours of dead silence. That's not a behavior that needs to change. Don't let somebody else tell you how it needs to be. And you have to practice agency in that way of like, don't let someone make you feel weird, especially for something that like, does it affect anybody? Does it make somebody sad? If no, then like, keep doing it. Don't let people choose your life for you. Especially when you're an autistic person, you look to others. We are constantly analyzing other people's behaviors. And it just kind of gets to the point where I just realized I spent so much of my life not even knowing who I am because I didn't allow myself to feel the joy in the moment. Life can be so depressing. You have to get the little joys where you can, and you cannot worry about social norms, especially if it's not going to affect like your livelihood or your living situation. You can't let that stuff prevent you from being able to experience joy. I kind of come from things from more humanities approach, a more philosophical approach. I like to think of this in terms as an epistemic conversation. This is a conversation about who has the knowledge and who has the power, right? To do what they can with that knowledge. And as a medical provider, as a mental health practitioner, you carry so much power, so much weight in your client's eyes. You quite literally can be the determining factor that makes them be able to stay in their home or them become institutionalized. And that is a weight that your clients are very aware of. And because of that, we're fearful. We are fearful of what we tell you. Make sure that you are always in a position where you are able to hear and take it in. And especially when it's things that you disagree with. Autistic people are a particular population that absolutely does experience a lot of suicidal ideation. I have talked to autistic people who have talked to mental health practitioners who come in with their own biases. And in a lot of cases, nobody is the same. Nothing quite looks the same. So in this instance, this was a person that was experiencing suicidal ideation who felt like they were at the end of their rope and were experiencing a lot of depression, and they were coming to their mental health therapist about like this stuff. Well, the feedback and response that they got was not what they were expecting. They were basically told that their problems were not as severe because they were not presenting the way that a neurotypical person presents when they are depressed. Autistic people, typically when they are depressed, they do not withdraw from work. They don't start taking days off like a lot of neurotypical people might when they're depressed. They need some mental health days, right? Because that would interfere with their routine. They keep going to work every single day. They keep up all of their obligations, and to the therapist, it can't be that severe because you're maintaining all of your social obligations. But on the inside, we're rotting. And so because of those biases and because you're in a position, because you got a degree, you feel like you know more, it locks you out from being able to provide actual empathetic care. You've got to place yourself in the actual shoes and the actual worldviews of your clients and solve things in a way that will make sense and work for the client. You can't give neurotypical coping mechanisms to a non-neurotypical person and expect them to work the same. You kind of have to adapt it. And most autistic people I know, a lot of it is us coping with a reality in an existence that does not want us to be a part of it. That's not a thing that you can say, well, if you just kind of calm down, if you do some breathing exercises, that problem doesn't go away. And I feel like therapy and mental health practitioners, if they hear this, I think that they can relate to, like, there's kind of a reckoning in the industry right now of like, well, how do you solve things like climate change based depression without solving climate change? We're all kind of like doing coping mechanisms and band-aids. I feel like a lot of mental health practitioners, they need to have a full scope, a social model attitude, but also understand that sometimes things don't look like how they look like in the book. Sometimes they are different. And when you aren't open to change, if you aren't open to new information, you're not going to be able to give fully trauma-informed, neuroaffirming care to your clients. If you can understand the logic, then we are going to be able to trust you so much more. And we're going to be able to get so much work done. And that relationship's just going to be so much more. And the easiest way you can do is just don't follow your own internal logic, follow your client's logic, and then see how you can add your stuff in to tweak things to make their life better. We've got to find solutions that work on a community level and not just, well, this is what I was taught 20 years ago. We got to do that. That's kind of where I'm coming from on that. I know it's a little harsh on mental health practitioners, and I think that they do really great work. I want to be your client. I want to be your patient. I want to give you my money. You know how expensive it is? Like, work with me, We are always the one that has to change. The onus is always on us. And that builds so much resentment that it makes it hard to form and maintain relationships. When you're a mental health practitioner and you're not taking that point of view, you're just reinforcing masking, which is going to lead to more problems for your patient down the line. What do we think of the people who have meltdowns in public? We call them meltdowns, we call them tantrums. We don't think, oh, that person is experiencing a nervous system medical issue. We don't think of it that way. If he talks to a mental health professional, you know what they usually will say? Well, we need to get your anger under control. Well, what caused that? What was the stimuli? How itchy was his shirt? We don't think about those environmental factors that lead to these mental health crises. Because of that, it puts a lot of the onus on the person that's actually experiencing a crisis. And it's their fault. It's their responsibility. It's you that needs to take care of it so that it does not inconvenience anyone else around you. If you have a meltdown in public and you're autistic, and God forbid you're an autistic person of color, you are not safe. Someone will call the police on you and you will probably go to jail. At some point, we have to, as a society, address the actual problem. I think that a lot of that could be done through mental health practice, could be, well, doing it in a family, doing it with your community. How can I help you develop self-advocacy and agency and talk this out with your family so that as a community, we can come around and support you? And I just don't feel like that is an approach that's taken very often, in part because it's hard, but we need to do the hard work. We have to have collective liberation, and that involves community members. That involves your next door neighbors. It involves empathy. I don't think that as a society we're lacking empathy, but I do think that we are just so fearful of one another that, a lot of these crises, especially ones that end up with police interference, if people knew that guy, I don't think he would be in jail. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if someone's having a public freak out and somebody knew that because we all knew each other and had community, there would be recourse. There could be things that we can do. Sometimes with mental health practitioners, they can go a little extreme and aren't patient to fully kind of understand what's going on. We just immediately go, well, this is the safety measure, so we've got to do it. I just don't know how helpful that is in long-term practice. I think it stops a lot of little tiny problems, but the dam is cracked and at any second it's going to blow. The suicide rates continue to get higher. They aren't getting lower for our population. There is nothing sexier, nothing more attractive than somebody who is absolutely willing to let me talk for 5-10 minutes uninterrupted. That is the most affirming thing imaginable. I'm very direct, but I have the autistic fear of being not perceived correctly because I'm so often not, because people will not take my words at face value. They've got to put some tone and meaning on it. And I'm not always in control of my tone. Being able to talk about a special interest for 5 to 10 minutes completely uninterrupted, it's self-regulating. Like, I feel calmer. I feel better talking about vampires for 10 minutes or talking about some celebrity drama for 10 minutes than meditating. I've never felt as good. And I've done the meditating thing. I did meditating every day for like 3 years when I was first in my mental health journey. That stuff does not cut being able to just talk about something that I love with someone else. I really like it when people don't immediately go to advice. I think people forget that they need to validate first. The whole point of sharing anything is to be heard. It's not to be told where you went wrong. It's not to be told what you need to do. I think the very first thing is to be heard. And then I have friends who are very good about asking if I want advice before they give it. It just comes down to understanding me and how I work and being willing to have a relationship that is maybe not as conventional. I have friends where I haven't spoken to them in 4 or 5 months. We are still incredibly close, very good friends. And if I see them tomorrow, I will probably talk to them for 6 hours straight and then not see them again for another 4 months. I'm a great listener. I love to listen. You got a problem? Come to me, get it all out, and then we can talk about it afterwards if you want to. Just being willing to engage with people in ways that aren't necessarily traditional is the biggest thing. And I think that that probably is applicable to anybody else with a different mental health condition. Being able to meet me where I'm at instead of just like, oh, well, they talk too much. You're missing out on a really cool relationship. I'm a really cool person. I'm a great person to talk to. If you cannot handle somebody speaking for more than 10, 15 minutes, man, you must not watch TV or listen to a podcast. I just want people to meet me where I'm at, and I'm willing to accommodate and meet them where they're at. The deepest relationships are the ones where we can do that for each other.
To learn more about Merge, please visit us at hdi.uky.edu/MERGE.